How's it going, everybody? So there's a ton of things to consider when purchasing a tent for backpacking. Different materials, different types of tents, different pole structures, endless designs of tents out there, and it can get really confusing when trying to choose the one you want, especially when they're super expensive. The tent for backpacking is definitely one of the most crucial pieces of gear, obviously, when you're getting into the sport of backpacking. And it's just something that you really want to do a lot of research on. It's definitely not one you just want to pick out because you like the color. So today I'm going to give you some tips on what to look for when choosing the right backpacking tent for you. This is mostly going to be on what I look for in a backpacking tent. So some good tips will be thrown out here and there, but this is basically what I'm looking for when I'm choosing a backpacking tent. So hopefully this video can be helpful to you guys. So let's get this one started off right. Today we have the Voodoo Ranger Imperial IPA. I'm really liking the IPAs. This Imperial IPA is very smooth. I'm liking this one. So okay, I think we should discuss it. There are two basic kinds of tents. There's tons of stuff I'm not going to go over in this video. I'm just going to go over the basics, basically what I am interested in. You got freestanding, you got non-freestanding. Freestanding tents come with their own tent poles, pretty much your standard tent that you find in any store. If you've ever slept in a tent, chances are it's probably been a freestanding tent. Basically, you have two or more poles that kind of arc around the top of it. You can actually set these up without staking them to the ground, hence the name freestanding. So if you set it up, the poles go in the little grommets in the bottom of the tent. You can even pick up the tent and move it to different spots and whatnot. As where the other kind of tents, you kind of have to stake down and then use a pole to support it in the middle in one or two spots normally. A non-freestanding tent a lot of times is convenient for people that don't want extra weight of carrying additional tent poles. So the main pro of a non-freestanding tent is that you can use your trekking poles. If you hike with trekking poles, those can double as your tent poles. One other cool thing is you can get a little carbon fiber pole for a lot of them. So this is like super light. This thing is tiny. I don't know what it weighs. 1 to 2 ounces, 3 ounces maybe. This is for a new tent that I'm going to be trying out this weekend, actually, on a trip. So make sure you guys subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell as well so I can notify you when that trip video is up. This enables the non-freestanding tent to be considerably lighter most of the time over the freestanding, although there are some very light freestanding options out there. Non-freestanding tents, definitely a more of a learning curve. There are definitely a more advanced backpacking piece of gear. They're a little bit more finicky. You need to practice more with them. You can't just throw it up first go. I feel like you definitely need to know what you're doing. So I'd say if you're a beginner, I would probably stay away from the non-freestanding tents. A lot of them can get very pricey, and they take a little bit more research, and they really vary in shapes and sizes more than the freestanding tents, I would say. So two of the most popular kind of tents, I say, a 3-season tent and a 4-season tent. 4-season tent being something that is more winterproof, walls that go pretty much all the way down to the ground, essentially blocking out wind, keeping you more warm during the night. The con of that being breathability. I actually don't own a 4-season tent, nor have I ever used one, but I imagine that they could have some condensation issues because they're made to hold in heat more. So if you guys actually have any experience with 4-season tents, put it in the comments below, because that's genuinely something that I'm curious about. I've never dabbled in the 4-season tent realm, never done any like super cold camping, so that's something that I might like to get into someday. So 3-season tents, pretty much all I ever mess with. I take them into some pretty cold climates. Tents are something that I don't personally like depend on warmth for. So when I'm thinking about sleeping at night, my sleep system, I feel like, should be good with my sleeping pad, my sleeping bag. That should be good without a shelter over me. But I make sure that my sleep system is warm enough to take me to whatever temperature it's going to get that night without adding in the extra warmth of the tent. Just make sure you have a good insulated sleeping pad and a good quilt, and you should really be warm in any tent in the winter, I feel like, depending where you live. Okay, I'm talking about like my normal Ohio winters. Like, 10, 20 degrees Fahrenheit. The tent walls, you got a single wall, you got a double wall, triple wall? Pretty sure that doesn't exist. A single wall tent meaning you have one piece of fabric between you and the outside. Double wall tents usually refer to the fact that you have like an inner bug net and then a tarp style covering over top your tent. The double wall is normally bug net and some type of rain protection layer. Single wall tents, very, very prone to condensation. Just because your tent is waterproof doesn't mean that it's not going to get wet inside. If you don't have a lot of experience camping in the rain or in different temperature changes, condensation happens whether you want to admit it or not. If it's just like a monsoon downpouring, there's a chance your tent can actually wet through and you'll get like these little water droplets that are hanging in your tent. I've seen condensation so bad in tents that whenever it starts raining really heavily, it's actually bouncing all the droplets onto your gear on the inside. That is why I personally am a fan of double wall tents. I like having that extra bug layer inside, not only for versatility, meaning like I can set my tent up without the rain fly if it's a nice night, have good view of the stars, have good breeze, good ventilation, but also extra rain protection. So even though obviously water is going to go through a bug net, it is that extra layer. So when condensation drips, there's a good chance that if your walls are, you know, semi-vertical, it will hit the bug net. The water droplets will then drip down without coming right in and soaking your down quilts that are crucial for you to keep warm during the night. I also like the double wall tent design because when I'm sleeping, I have no control over my body. I might be rolling all around, and that little extra bathtub floor with the bug net covering keeps my rolling body and my sleeping bag from touching that wall. The footbox of sleeping bags touching tent walls is like my biggest pet peeve. It's something that's always bugged me. You cannot sleep with your feet in the wall of a tent. If it's raining, they will get wet. It will soak through, condensation will get you. It's just not good. So if you're super tall and you have problems with your feet always touching the edge of the tent, the angle of the walls is actually something to consider. So if you notice, freestanding tents usually have like a good arc to them. They have like a good bubble because of the poles, how they can bend. And what that enables the walls to do is become like more vertical down at the bottom because they slowly arc up. And that's nice because then when your feet are at the edge, there's not a tent wall touching the edge. A lot of the non-freestanding tents, you'll see they're more of like a trapezial, hexagonal, pyramid, teepee style shaped shelter. And when you're looking at dimensions on these tents, a lot of times you'll notice they're longer, and that is to account for the rake of the ceiling that is essentially or potentially touching your feet. So if you're really tall, definitely something to consider with a non-freestanding tent that your feet might be touching the edge wall. Even if you're figuring out your measurements, you got to think about that you're raised up off the ground by whatever sleeping pad you're on, and then your quilt is actually going to loft. So if my footbox from the bottom of the tent to the top of the loft of my bag is this big, and my tent comes down to a point, then I'm going to have to be shoved up towards the head end, you know, so far to accommodate for that. Not to mention the head end is probably like that too. So like in one of my tents particularly, the top of the tent is right over my face a lot of time. Not a deal breaker, just something to consider. Now tent size is definitely like the one thing I feel like you really just got to know what you want. One person tents, usually very small. Most people say that a two-person tent is actually a one-person tent. I am comfortable in one-person tents. Most people like to buy two-person tents, so consider that. I'm kind of a shorter guy. I'm like 5'7", and I fit in one-person tents pretty good. Plus, I'm not like super wide. I'm pretty skinny, so I can fit in my tents, my one-person tents, pretty good with my gear. And that's another thing to consider is vestibule. Oh, I sound like Jeremiah Stringer. Vestibule space. So the vestibule is like an overhang outside of your bug net or in front of your door of your tent, somewhere where you can store your gear that's not directly inside the bug net of your tent. Good vestibule space is really crucial. It's something I overlooked when purchasing one of my tents. Being able to cook under your vestibule. So I don't like cooking in the bug net of my tents because obviously I have one-person tents that are kind of small. But if I have a nice big overhang where I can sit my stove on the ground, not on the fabric of my tent, and still be covered from rain and weather. It might be pouring down rain all night and you got to make dinner and you didn't bring anything that you can eat without heating up, so you have to cook. Having that tarp covering in an area that is able to be cooked under is crucial, I think. Something else that I always consider is ease of setup also on tents. Some tents are super easy, super quick to set up, and some are absolutely terrible. I actually bought a Lightheart Gear Solo a few years ago, and the reason I got that is because it looked like the fastest, easiest tent to set up. And it is super fast. In a pinch, if it's really rainy or the weather really turns on you quickly, super easy to get out of the elements. So tent materials is a big one. I personally like Dyneema or DCF tents, super lightweight. It doesn't roll up as small as other materials, but it doesn't absorb any water. So a lot of other materials such as sil nylon and sil poly that a lot of these other non-freestanding tents especially are made out of, they do absorb a little bit of water. So you might gain like a pound. You might be packing out a pound of water after a night's rain, as where if you had a Dyneema tent, it's still going to be just as light pretty much as when you set it up the day before when it was dry. If you're new to backpacking and you start buying backpacking gear, you're going to find things that you like and you don't like about everything you buy, and it's really a progression. It's an evolution on what, not only like what is good gear, but what really works for you. So tents are no exception. But that's pretty much all I wanted to cover on this. Tons and tons of stuff I didn't go over, like ground sheets too. Quick theory on ground sheets: they don't really do much. If there's a big stick or a rock coming through your tent, it's probably going to poke through your little ground sheet and the bottom of your tent floor. So as far as protection goes, not a lot. I like ground sheets just for like an additional vapor barrier in case I set up in something that's going to potentially be swampy if it starts raining or whatever. I'm going to be testing out a new tent. Like I said, it's going to be interesting. I have mixed feelings about it. It's a pretty cool tent. I love the design of it. I've only set it up once, kind of struggled with it a little bit. It's definitely not near as easy to set up as I hoped, but as far as the design goes, it's a sweet looking tent. And that's what it's all about, right? Looking cool out there. That's it. I'm done rambling. So thank you guys once again for watching. Comment down below. Let me know what kind of tents you guys are using. 4-season tents especially. If you guys have any experience with that, I'd like to know some good ones. And I'd like to know condensation issues. You guys ever have any problems with that? So let me know down below. Subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next one.